23-24 financial year, we have a budget of 146 billion rand. This is made up of receipts from national, provincial equitable share amounting to 115.9 billion, conditional grants 26.3 billion, our provincial own receipts making up 3.8 billion, and provincial cash reserves of 14.9 million rand. The amount of spending by provincial departments amounts to 146 million. That then leaves us with a contingency reserve of 126.7, decreasing to 115.7, and then 138.3 million in the 25-26 financial year. Then in terms of the fiscal framework, this is just then giving information in terms of the narrative of that table. And again, the next slide talks to the actual provincial equitable share and how that changes over the MTF from 115.9 billion to 118.8 billion and 123 billion. There are no further fiscal consolidation PES budget cuts over the MTF, while noting that the budget cuts that were made in 21-22 remain within our baseline and still exert serious pressure on certain of our departments. The formula updates that result in a decrease over the PS over all 3 years of the MTF. There are additions, however, that are made, and we will take you through those. The conditional grant amount amounts to 26.3 billion, 24.8 billion, and 26 billion over the MTF. There have been no budget cuts over the conditional grants, and there we have seen inflationary increases in certain of them, and others we will then highlight those major increases. In terms of provincial owned revenue, the amounts of 3.8 and 4 billion, 4.2 over the MTF period. There have been some reductions in the provincial owned revenue, mainly due to the lower health patient fees, where there are challenges in collecting funds from the RAF. So in aggregate, there's a reduction in our own revenue by 34.9 million, 36.5 million, and 50.6 million. The provincial owned revenue resources contribute towards funding government programs, so any reduction in the owned revenue means that we have less resources to fund our government programs. The provincial cash resources refer to funds that were allocated that became available in the prior year's adjustment estimates or from funds that were suspended from one year to the next. The first is 14.9 million, which amounts, that's in total 14.9, which is broken up to vote 10 sports, which was a sponsorship received by the department that needs to be reappropriated. And then vote 6, there were funds that were suspended, 14.6 million rand. In terms of the contingency reserve, currently it's budgeted at 126.7, decreasing to 115.7 and 138.3 million. As the MEC alluded in the speech, this is possibly the lowest the contingency reserve has been, and it's really important that we have a contingency reserve to protect the provincial fiscus, particularly for unforeseen expenditure pressures when they arise. We do believe that we are going to be able to supplement this amount during the year, particularly looking at unspent funds and uncommitted funds within the public entities, and we will be looking at that in terms of seeing how we can top up the contingency reserve. This is also in line with the Finance Portfolio Committee's observations during mid-year where there was slow spending by the public entities. If we then move to the changes in the provincial equitable share, there are increases that have been made over the MTF as follows: 2 billion in the first year, 2.1 in the second year, 2.2 in the final year of the MTF. This is with regards to the 3% wage adjustment carry through. We engaged extensively with national government to ensure that we received the full allocation, and therefore as a province we have not received a shortfall in this regard and are able to cover the full cost implications of the 3%. It's important to note that in real terms it's actually more than 3% if we take into consideration other issues such as the housing allowance. And in terms of the current negotiations, wage negotiations, National have given the commitment that if there is to be any further increases, this will be fully funded to the province. Then in terms of additional funding that has been allocated to the province, this is in terms of the engagements we've had with through the 10x10s and with the national departments because of the historic budget cuts. Department of Health will be receiving an additional 1.5 billion and you'll see the increase over the MTF up to 1.6 billion. And this is really because of the severe budget cuts and the spending pressures that the department is facing. Similarly, Department of Education is receiving 1.1, increasing to 1.5 over the MTF, again due to the budget pressures that are taking place in the department. As again, we celebrate the 631 million rand that has been allocated to COGTA to deal with the back pay relating to Izinduna. We are aware that there was a contingent liability as well as many litigious matters, and these are now going to be dealt with in terms of this allocation. This is an allocation that covers the full cost of the amount that is outstanding. And we will ensure as Treasury that the necessary controls are in place before any payments are processed in this regard. Then changes in terms of the provincial equitable share. As we know, the data is updated every year, and this is influenced by a number of different components. In our case, in terms of education, the numbers with regards to school-age population that are captured in terms of the school enrollment data on the Lurit system, those numbers have decreased, as well as the Department of Health in terms of the district health information services patient load data, as well as other aspects within the health component there have been changes in that regard, and this has led to a reduction in both of those. Also, they utilized the 2019 regional GDP data, as we know that the census information has not come out yet. Because of these declines, both in education as well as in health, it means that our share of the provincial equitable share has been reduced by 0.16%. This means that our share is still second in the country, and it is now at 20.36%, phased in over a period of time up to 20.19 in the outer MTF period. But importantly, in monetary terms, this means we've got a reduction in the equitable share of 235 in the first year, 548 million in the second year, and 979 in the outer year. Again, just to reiterate, we are the second highest recipient of the provincial equitable share, sitting at 20.36, second to Gauteng in terms of the country's allocation of funding. If we then look at overall in terms of the allocation that we're receiving, the additional funding that I've mentioned in terms of Department of Health, Education, the 3% allocation for cost of living adjustments, and the Izinduna, we are looking at a total increase on our MTF of 5.1 billion in the first year, 4.48 billion in the second year, and 4.3 billion in the last financial year. We then have a slide which just gives a sense of the national fiscal framework, which indicates out of all of the spheres of government, national departments will receive 49.1% of the total budget. This is a decrease from the previous years, where on average they were about 50.5%. That means provinces are receiving more money, moving from 40.9% last year to 41.2%, and local government increasing from 8.7% to 9.7%. So money moving from national to the provinces and to local government. In terms of our provincial owned revenue, here we are also seeing a reduction at the net position. We're looking at a reduction of 34.9 million, 35.3 and 49.3 over the MTF. In the main, the contributors of the decline is the Department of Health, due to the issue that we mentioned earlier with the road accident fund not refunding the claims that the department has been submitting, but the department will be looking into this to try and address this challenge. The further cuts, as I say, obviously, if we've got a reduction in our revenue, it means we've got less money in the budget and therefore led to further budget cuts. Then in terms of allocation of funding from National Treasury, I have already alluded to the allocations from education and health. I'm just going to just look at the next major issues that we haven't covered here. We also then, in terms of how we allocated the 3% wage adjustments, we allocated the amount, only the departments that received an allocation in the 22-23 adjustments then received funding which was allocated proportionately in terms of their budget contribution. And it's for this reason that those same three departments, Department of Transport, COGTA, and Provincial Treasury, given the delay in filling of posts and that those posts will not be filled for the full financial year, we engaged the HODs and it was agreed that that additional funding would then be allocated to the remaining departments. However, over the MTF, the last 2 outer years, all departments will receive the allocation proportionately. We also wanted to just again highlight that as much as we are receiving additional funding from national government, specifically for health and education, we are still facing major spending pressures. If we look at the budget cuts that took place in the 21-22 MTF budget, Department of Education was cut by 11.5 billion rand in terms of 23-24. As much as we received money in the 22-23 year, as well as the 23-24 year, we are still well below the original baseline of 8.7 billion rand. Similarly, with health, their budget was cut in terms of their baseline by 7.1 billion rand, and with the additional amount of 695 in the current year and 1.5 billion rand in the next financial year, we are still well below the initial baseline of 4.8 billion rand. So just those 2 departments alone, we're looking at a shortfall of 13.6 billion rand in their budget cuts that would have been within their baselines. The next slide just then again demonstrates what I mentioned around the 3% wage adjustment funding, where we received 2 billion rand in the 23-24 financial year. And you will see there the 3 departments did not receive any allocation in that year, whereas in the 24-25, all departments received an allocation in terms of the 3% wage adjustment. As we indicated, because of these cuts, both in the provincial equitable share and our own revenue, we had to cut back our spending as a province by 270 million rand in the first year, 584 million in the second year, and 1 billion rand in the last year of the MTF. And this cut has been proportionately spread across all of the departments in that last 2 outer years, with the exception of the first year, where Department of Education, Health and Social Development have been excluded from any budget cuts, given these budget pressures that they currently are currently facing. We then show this description in terms of numbers, where we show the indication of the budget reductions due to the equitable share updates, as well as the provincial own revenue reductions, giving us the total amount that we needed to cut from departments. We then give an indication of how we cut the departments' budgets, and as you can see, we utilized the proportion that they contribute towards the PES in order to understand those budgets. So as an example, if you look at Department Vote 1, Office of the Premier, in 23-24, they were cut by 9.8 million rand, 3.9 in the next year, and 6.9 in the outer year. And similarly, that is the approach that was undertaken and presented through MinCombud and Cabinet. In terms of funding for provincial priorities, there are 3 areas that we were able to accommodate in terms of the additional allocations. Vote 1, Office of the Premier, receives an additional 100 million rand, which is a once-off amount in 23-24 for the KZN Youth Empowerment Fund, following the extensive responses that have been received in the first call-out. In Vote 2, the Provincial Legislature receives 100 million rand, as the MEC announced, towards increasing the funding for political parties. Previously, we were ranked 7th out of the 9 provinces, and with this adjustment, we will now be ranked at first place in terms of other provinces. There is also a consideration of a further 15 million rand during the year in terms of voter education activities, particularly for the lead up to the 24 general elections. Safety and Liaison also receives a once-off 11.5 million, which is for the establishment of the Community Safety Intervention Unit, specifically for safety interventions. We look at the conditional grants. As we indicated, on the good side, we've received additional funding over the MTF, 1.6 in the first year, 269 million in the second year, and 1.4 billion rand over the MTF. Briefly to touch on each of these grants, the Education Infrastructure Grant increases by 378 million in the next financial year. This is a grant that's incentive-based, and the department did incredibly well in terms of submitting planning documentation and showing the capacity to spend, and therefore they received an incentive allocation of 109 million rand. There was also additional funds that would carry through cost for the floods. In April, 260 million rand was allocated in this regard, and members will recall that in the current financial year, additional 95 million rand was allocated for the flood damage. The grant, therefore, has a budget of 2.9 million rand after these increases. In terms of the National School Nutrition Program, it receives 120.9 million in the first year, 112.5, 226.5 over the MTF. And as we know, this is for the provision of nutritious meals to our learners. In the Early Childhood Development Grant, this increases by 14.8 million, 45.5, and 109.5, and this is a top-up for the subsidy amount, increasing access to the ECD subsidy, pre-registration support packages, and nutrition support and results-based finance initiative. The Health Facility Revitalization Grant is also an incentive-based grant. The department also did incredibly well in terms of the submission of documents and their capacity to spend. They scored 94%, as the MEC indicated, and as a result, their budget has increased in this regard. The Provincial Roads Maintenance Grant sees a significant increase of 760 million rand in the 23-24 year. Of this, 185 million relates to the carry-through costs for the repairs due to the damages caused by the floods. Again, members will recall that 589 million was allocated in the 22-23 adjustment estimates. The balance of 575 million is really being allocated to address the backlog of the refurbishment of provincial roads. As we know, we have a significant backlog in that regard. And in total, therefore, the budget for this grant is 3.3 billion rand for the next year. The Comprehensive Agricultural Support Program received an increase of 163 million. Again, the department made an application to the budget facility for infrastructure and was successful, particularly for the construction of agri-hubs. In the first year, they will receive 8.4 million rand, increasing to 86.4 and 58.2 million over the MTF. The EPWP integrated grant for provinces receives 107.6 million rand, and this will create 4,199 jobs. We then indicate the departments that will receive this budget. Agriculture, Rural Development receives 4.6, ETIA receives 6.9 million, Education receives 1.9 million, Health 8.6 million, Human Settlement 7.6, Sports, Arts and Culture 2 million, COGTA 1.9, Transport 69.8, Public Works 3.8 million. We then have a social sector EPWP incentive grant. Here we're also looking at 87.8 million, creating 3,671 jobs. Of that, education receives 31.7, health 21.1 million, community safety and liaison 3.8 million, sports, arts and culture 2.2, and social development 28.8. If we then look at our summary of our provincial owned revenue, it gives an indication of where the sources of revenue come from. In this regard, in the main, it's our casino taxes. We were receiving 613.3 million rand. Horse racing taxes, 96.9. Liquor license, 31.7 million. The highest contributor is our motor licensing vehicles, which is 2.2 billion rand. And the next highest will then be interest that we receive on our cash reserves at 303 million. In total, we're looking at collecting, as a province, 3.8 billion in the first year, growing to 4 billion, and then 4.2 in the outer MTF. Provincial payments by vote. Here again, we give an indication of how the total budget is allocated per provincial department. The MEC did read out each of the votes allocation, so I won't do the same. But just to again reiterate, education receives the highest portion of 41.5 billion, 41.5% of the total budget, and health following next by 34.7% of the budget. Again, reiterating that we've got 10% of the budget is allocated to transfers, and public entities will be receiving 5.4 billion rand in the 23-24 budget. 62% of the budget also goes towards paying our public servants, and 7% will be spent on capital-related expenditure. That leaves us with 22% to purchase goods and services to implement other service delivery programs. Each votes chapter in the estimates of the Provincial Revenue Expenditure Book provides details of what the budget will be used for. There are various sections where this can be studied, where we're aligning the provincial budget to achieve government's prescribed outcomes, the outlook for the 23-24 MTF, the key assumptions that are used, the summary by program and economic classification, summary of all conditional grants, summary of all infrastructure, transfers and subsidies, analysis by program, where each chapter provides the details at a sub-program level of what the department undertakes to do over the MTF, as well as service delivery targets, personnel numbers, and the costs of the personnel. Infrastructure being critical for our economic growth, we give a provision here in terms of the infrastructure that will be undertaken. In terms of existing infrastructure, the amount that will be utilized is 11.11 billion rand. This is in the main for maintenance and repair, upgrades and refurbishment. New infrastructure, we're looking at 1.2 billion rand in that regard. Infrastructure transfers, we're looking at 3.8 billion rand. Infrastructure leases, 530 million. Non-infrastructure, 2.8, totaling 19.5 billion rand. The last slide then is just in terms of how we fund that infrastructure. The infrastructure in the main is funded through conditional grants of 11.8 billion rand, and the provincial equitable share and own revenue then funds the balance at 7.6 billion rand. We then also give a detailed breakdown per vote in terms of the conditional grants. So vote 3 conditional grants that agriculture receives total 66 million rand. In terms of vote 5, education, they receive 2.9 billion. In the main, that is education infrastructure grant, making up 2.9 billion rand. Early childhood development grant, 18 million. Health is made up of 1.4 billion rand, broken up in terms of health facility revitalization grant and the EPWP that I spoke to earlier. Human settlement receives 3.7 billion rand in conditional grants, made up of the human settlement development grant of 3 billion rand and informal settlements upgrading of 790 million. Sports, arts and culture is really in 70 million rand, made up of the community library services grant. Transport then is the last one, which is 3.4 billion rand, made up of provincial roads and maintenance of 3.3 and the EPWP grant that I mentioned earlier. That is the end of the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, HOD. Colleagues, if you are listening attentively to the MEC for Finance, you will agree with me that this is the short summary of what was presented by the MEC. That's what it is all about, just to simplify it to all of us. But I would not want to assume and then think that there is no one who has got a question for clarity. I'm handing over to you to raise up your hands and then indicate your clarities if there are any. Because as I indicated earlier on, we want you, when you go to this sacred business of the scrutiny of the budget, you go there with full understanding as to what each vote is allocated and for what. This is what we wanted to do. I wanted to check if there are any hands that are up for clarity. I see the hand of Honorable Kaula, that's number 1. Honorable Mhlegazi, you will be number 2. Only 2 hands. Yabonye mina nje benginayo imibuzo benginama expectations. Uvese owaphendula wonke ama expectations ami MEC. You could see me singing in the passage. You know why I had to sing, the 631.08 million rand. That's the thing that had created a huge headache for all of us. Now today I will have sweet dreams. That's what will happen. Ngovuka ngo-12 kusasa. Honorable Kaula, you wanted to be clarified on something, my leader.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Greetings to the Speaker and the Premier, the Executive, Honorable Bulawayo, Leader of the Official Opposition, Ngocha, colleagues. 3 issues, Chair. The first 2 are to the HOD, and the last one will be to the Honorable MEC. The slide number 12, HOD on page 6, which talks to additions to education and under other departments on their spending pressures. I serve in the Portfolio Committee of Education, and I know that their pressures are deep. I just want to find out if that addition is intended to also, how do I put it, look at their projected overspending for this financial year, which is already estimated to be above 700 million rand due to the budget cuts of the previous years, if it is going to help in those instances, because already education is projecting to go with their 2022-23 to the 23-24 kit. And education has been continuously reporting that there have been miscalculations in respect of these cuts from national. If this is a reimbursement of those miscalculations, because even last week at the meeting, the CFO reported that those miscalculations from national have not yet been sorted out, and they go to as far as something like 900 million or so, if I'm not mistaken. But the chair is here. I'm sure he has got the correct figures. And secondly, HOD, on your slide 33 on page 17, where you talk of the increases to NSNP, I just want to find out, because education has reported that from 2023 onwards, children in school are going to be enjoying 2 meals per day, if that is intended to cater for that. Because if that is the case, then this is peanuts. So I just wanted to find out, is it just an addition, or it's an addition that is intended to cater for those 2 meals a day? Because if it is so, then you still need to put more money. I don't know from where, because this is a grant. Lastly, thanks, KK. Lastly, Honorable Chairperson, Honorable MEC, you spoke of in your opening. You said it is for this reason that we support the acceleration of the decision to implement and allocate a budget to the establishment of the Community Safety Intervention Unit in our province. Now, I just want to find out is this linked to what the Premier said in SOPA when the Premier spoke about buying vehicles for safety and security, for the police to be specific, if this is linked to that. If that is the case, I just want to find out from both the MEC and the HOD, in which program is that 10 million per department going to be coming from? Where is it budgeted? I haven't seen it here. I've only seen statements. So ngoba manje I'm a slow learner, ngifuna ukuthi izinto ngiyithole kahle. If that is the case, then ikuphi leyo mali kulama programs department per department, that 10 million per department? Is it here or was it just a statement? Ngifuna ukuzwa kwena HOD, is that money here? If it is not here, then I'm okay, because it means that it was just talk. Thanks, Chair.
Honorable Mhlekazi.
Yabulel, Shalom. Just 3 questions from my side, Chair. I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. If I do a comparative between the MTF 23-24 to 24-25, and I look at your revised allocations, it moves from 146.1 billion to 147.7 billion in the 24-25 year. My calculation is that's a 1% increase, which is well below inflation. I just want to make sure that I am reading that correctly, that it is only 1%, and then obviously in the outer year there's a 4% increase, which looks more viable. Then just to follow on to a question that was asked, when we engaged with the Department of Education, their 900 odd million rand overdraft, we were told it's not in the name of the Department of Education, but has come out of the provincial fiscus. So my understanding is, how does that 900 odd million affect the cash situation of Treasury? What is the impact? I mean, has it come off the bottom line? Is it going to be reduced over a period? I'm a bit confused there. And then, Chair, the last question is on the Izinduna. And obviously, we welcome National Treasury finally standing up and putting their hand up. But my question to Treasury is, originally, the calculations were well over R1 billion of back pay, and the amount that we've been allocated is well short. Why is that? Could we get an explanation on that? Thanks very much, Chair.
Honourable Chair.
Would want to indicate to some of the colleagues that some of the issues will be responded to at the portfolio committee level. For example, the last one that you are raising, Mthegas, we who are deployed in Kokta know how did it come from 1.4 billion rand to 631. You remember those engagements that we kept on reporting that were happening with the Kokta minister, with the finance minister, and eventually escalated to the presidents. So some of them, I will not be sure whether they will be knowing all those, but we who belong to portfolio committees have specifics. Honorable Rajpanse, I saw your hand, my leader.
Okay. Thank you, Honourable Chair. My question is to the head of department, and the concern has always been infrastructure, and the fact that it should be based on performance-based budgeting. And for this reason, given the fact that almost 20% of the total budget is for infrastructure, and I understand the the three ways in which that budget is done. However, if we want to get results, and Treasury, needs to take a stand on this, because I feel that we should have some, response from them about whether Treasury is going to make it mandatory for posts to be created for project managers and project and risk managers, in order to ensure that the projects get finished and that the infrastructure budget is spent efficiently. And I think also in the strengthening of the M&E units in the departments. So I think that we need to get some response from Treasury, because COE is generally, now regulated in the Premier's department, and I think that we need to, see whether these posts and whether Treasury is ensuring that these posts are created. The other is on the expanded public works program, and I know that we've been told about the 5 departments that are going to get the EPWP. But I still feel that a lot of engagement has to take place in respect of the EPWP programs in order for it to be spent properly. Because we as MPLs, when we engage with people on the ground, and again, Honourable Chair, you may tell us that this has to be done by portfolio committees or at that level. But I think that EPWP, its whole planning, which are the interventions that are being looked at, these things come from somewhere higher up. Sometimes we are told it comes from the national as guidelines, sometimes from our executive. But the thing is that we are the MPLs and we know what are the burning issues on the ground. If these 5 departments have the EPWP budget, then apart from just the portfolio committee, but there has to be more consensus on which issues are taken up with EPWP, because eventually it has to devolve to the level of the grassroots, where MPLs, councils, etc., will play a monitoring role. And we have to be, happy then that the programs or the items that are chosen under EPWP are actually what is required in the community, what will make meaningful difference to service delivery, and actually what will help for service delivery. So I think that we need to get some sort of assurance from Provincial Treasury. What is the role then of the MPs? Because we just don't want a program just to come to us when it's already been thought by somebody else, somewhere else, and yet it's not making a meaningful difference in the lives of communities or for service delivery. Thank you.
I saw the hand of Honorable Mshengu, and I will give all of you friends. And you must know that this process that I'm managing, there is an announcement by the MEC that she wants no fruitless and wasteful expenditure. There are refreshments prepared. Therefore, would not allow you to leave, otherwise will be guilty on the first day of incurring fruitless and wasteful expenditure as the legislature. Mshengu is your opportunity, my leader, to honorable MECs. The Premier has made an announcement through me that she would like to see you outside. So please, even if you are having pressing matters, we are begging you to make sure that you are able to see the MEC outside this meeting. Honorable Mshengu.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I fully apologize for raising my hand so late. Chair, I am worried that the MEC has made mention of a number of capital projects that are going to be undertaken with this budget. But my biggest worry, Chair, is that there is this growing trend of capital projects being stalled by a number of people, those business forums and what have you. Now, the challenge is that it's not necessarily a responsibility of police of policing projects. What are we going to do? I looked at the community safety budgets allocated. Yes, perhaps it's not their task as well. They are not security guards. But what are we going to do to safeguard this investment that is its sole purpose is to benefit and change the quality of lives for our people out there? Because huge amounts of money are being invested into these projects, but they are being stalled. And there is no mechanism, as it were, to actually respond to these things. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. We are now handing over to the Provincial Treasury to respond to the issues, and we'll summarize them for you according to our own analysis. When you are seeing us not moving at all when the MEC was tabling the speech, it's because we wanted to give all of us the line as to what the budget means. We're busy analyzing as the MEC was continuing with their presentation. HOD and your team.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members. I do have a full team here, and you'll be pleased to see it's mainly women. I'm also going to allow them to give comments where I don't cover the issues sufficiently. Just in terms of the questions, the spending pressures facing Department of Education and Health, the additional allocation that has been made will certainly not address the spending pressures. If you refer to slide 24, we indicated there that even with the additional allocations made in the current financial year and in the next MTF, there's still quite substantial cuts into the baseline. And therefore, the need for us to continuously engage with the National Department of Treasury, as well as education in the 10 by 10s, will be ongoing, because it is going to be a major challenge for the department in terms of the spending pressures that they are facing. In terms of the NSNP, we are not aware of 2 meals a day. We are aware some provinces, I think the Western Cape is one of them, has implemented 2 meals a day. The increase that we are seeing here is in fact the inflationary increase to accommodate the additional learners that are benefiting through the NSNP. In terms of community safety and liaison, the allocation that has been made here is specifically to deal with the current threat and loss of lives of the Izinduna, and that is specifically to address that issue. The announcement made by the Premier, the department is currently finalising the business plan that will be approved by the Cabinet, and each department will then be making the necessary allocation, which will be appropriated during the adjustment estimate. In terms of the increase over the MTF, the Honourable Member is correct. It does not appear to be an inflationary increase, but the 23-24 has got once-off allocations made, which relate, for example, to the flood disaster. And so therefore, if we exclude those, you will then see that it is in fact an inflationary increase if you take those amounts out. The overdraft by the Department of Education, this, as you know, we do not allow departments to go into overdraft. We will cash block their accounts. As we've explained previously, departments unfortunately utilize the funds of the cash of the next year to pay for invoices from the previous financial year. We therefore, that is why you're continuously seeing this as a recurring problem within the Department of Education. But we do cash block them so that they do not go into an overdraft situation. In terms of these Nduna, yes, initially the figures were over R1 billion, but after a full analysis by the officials of COGTA and a full audit of the beneficiaries, the amount was confirmed as correct, and we have been fully funded in that regard, and there are no shortfalls. In terms of infrastructure, yes, we agree that infrastructure is critical in terms of particularly leading to economic growth. But in this regard, we are, and the MEC did announce on it, in terms of the IDMS, it's quite a comprehensive system that would assist in proper planning, implementation, project management within departments, and I'm sure that Nelly will expand further on that. But there are capacity within departments, but there are specific departments like Department of Transport that we will be providing additional support in that regard. But the system is quite comprehensive and can assist in that regard. We also need to bear in mind that there are norms and standards that we have to adhere to, particularly for the social sector. If we fail to do that, we will face possible litigation. And so those norms and standards need to be adhered to. In terms of EPWP, this is in fact coordinated and managed by Public Works. And it's not the only program that leads to job creation. There are substantial other amounts and allocations that have been made in this regard, particularly in infrastructure and with the public entities. We were just highlighting the jobs specifically to EPWP. Then in terms of the last question around capital projects, yes, they were stalled by business forums, but with the Honourable MEC Duma's intervention, there has been extensive engagements with the business forums, and there is a process and an agreement in place in terms of how these issues will be channeled and dealt with, and we have seen quite a decline in terms of those obstructions. But I'll then maybe hand over, Chair, if you'll allow me, to the rest of the team to add. Thank you.
So, if you can add, this is power sharing,
Thank you, Chair. Just a minor addition on my side. So HOD had indicated just one of the once-off allocations that is in the 23-24 financial year. She spoke of the flood disaster, but it's also the incentive grants that's also once-off. So are the EPWP grants, they happen annually. So it's often that the first year of the MTF looks a bit higher because the allocations in the outer year haven't happened yet. And also just to supplement the response to Honourable Kawula on the issue, if the allocation made to education covers the projected over in the current year, it wouldn't. So the allocation is for the future financial years of the new MTF. Having said that, we are in engagement as a province to look what we can do. We are needing to table a second adjustments anyway this financial year because there are 2 allocations coming to us from National Treasury. And if there is an opportunity to assist education in that process, we will. But we were focusing on getting to this provincial budget day first, and we'll look at the numbers for that going forward, and we'll come back to this house. Thank you.
I think we have come to the end of this engagement. Or LGB, LOGB. I'm acronyms. Yes, Honorable Duma, the MEC for ATIA in KZN.
Thank you so much, Langamandla, for affording us this opportunity. Let us also greet the Premier, the Honorable Premier, the Speaker. The MEC was just presented the sterling budget and the technocrats inside. I just think it's an issue of clarity. Honorable Kaula raised a foundation question, and the HOD is responding as if the decision is still going to be taken. The Premier has already announced it, pronounced it, and the Cabinet took that resolution. What is left is the social cluster to expatiate on the issue of implementation is taken so that we are not caught out of the context of shade, or because the decision is taken and the process is being followed. So it's an execution process. Thanks, Chair.
Honorable Duma, for adding so that you relieve my lead. No, colleagues, I think we have come to the end of this session. The first thing that we would want all of us to know is that I was monitoring this. All of us are in possession of the Holy Bible or the Holy Quran in the form of the Green Book. I've been told that I'm called the Mr. Green Book. You know, when you have got this document, personally, you won't see me running around without this thing when I'm doing my work, because all the details are here, historical as well as the current one. So don't part ways with this one. Be the friend of the Holy Bible or the Holy Quran. This is the first point that we want to mention. The second thing that we would want to mention as well is around the role of ourselves, both the executive and the oversight. Ours will be to scrutinize this budget and compare it to the annual performance plans. Simple and straightforward. That's what we'll be doing. No. And we are guided by the PFMA and all the stuff. Something outside there, unless it is amended, there was the AG in one financial year, pinpointed one department that amended the APP without bringing it to the legislature is not in line with the law. That would be our responsibility on both sides. I'm talking about the members of the executive and ourselves who are doing oversight. You know, I don't want to say Treasury is part of us. No, they are part of the other side as well. And they also work with us because they've got that responsibility of monitoring everything. That's the second point, colleagues, that would want to make sure that we address. Colleagues, I heard the MEC vividly around the question of the pressures in 2 main departments. She indicated that those pressures will be there despite that increase that she announced. Then it is my own understanding that managing those pressures is the responsibility of all of us jointly. We have to, because we cannot afford our children not getting education. We cannot afford our people going to clinics and hospitals and then find some challenges there and whatever. And they differ, you know. In health, they will talk about the minimum staff establishment. Education will talk about the COE and all those things. We are clear. And some of us, because we know our role, it will be our responsibility to monitor those as you are doing, Kaula, as requested and invited last week. You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. Another thing that makes us happy, I heard the MEC indicating this, that the wage adjustments are fully covered by the National Treasury. So we are not going to have that problem and whatever. But the sins of the past will revisit us, definitely sure. I have got no doubt in my mind. So having said so, Honorable Kaul, we know as members of the Finance Portfolio Committee that the DORA cannot pass without our input. We are working on the dates with the officials of the National Treasury, Wendy and Pillay. I can't remember, they keep on changing the officials of the local government. We'll get 3 well-trained officials from the National Treasury who will engage with us. Those pressures in education and health will not escape us, otherwise we will be paid for nothing. Ours is not to do the monitoring and whatever, but to ensure that government departments function optimally. When they function optimally, they must have all the resources. You know, this is our understanding. So that one, we packed it. When the MEC was presenting, I realized, no, Wendy will have to be confronted on this matter. And she can't escape it. She knows it. We have been nagging her. And Duma, I know. We have been nagging them around the issue of Izinduna. You know yourselves, Rogers, that Wendy confirmed in October that no, Honorable Nkosi, don't stress about Izinduna back pay. It will come in the budget of 2023-2024. You know, it's because we are fighting, because we want all issues to be resolved. That's what we wanted just to indicate. That's what we wanted to indicate. So I think, colleagues, all of us are clear. We who are doing oversight, you know, we trust you as the Finance Portfolio Committee. That on the question of APPs, you are clued up. I can tell you, in the provincial treasury, we had even engaged on the 3rd draft of that particular thing. We can tell you that what has been presented here is very close, about almost 100% in line with the APP that we received, you know, including, we'll include up about the 14 point something million rand that you suspended in November. We'll include up. It's an oversight thing. As for officials, we've got capacity to analyze on our own and then guide where there's a need for guidance. So, colleagues, this is what we wanted to announce. To summarize. The budget, you know, when it gives the old man like me, you know, sweet dreams, it must tell you that the budget is not bad. It's a very good budget to be tabled in 2023-2024 with the challenges that we have isolated some of them and all the stuff. But because we are fighters, we'll fight together to resolve them for the benefit of the people who voted for us. To you officials, for the people that you are paid to serve. That is our understanding. So, colleagues, we have come to the end of this engagement. We think that lunch is ready. When we were checking, we were told it was 10 minutes. That's why I'm having such long remarks. Thank you very much, Bafowethu.
Thank